Hello, members, one and all of the Salivation Nation. Well, we have an article here that comes to us from the dailymail.com, and this was shared with me by Small Gold, and with some interesting news that I didn't realize. I thought all of this stuff was already made public, but apparently it's not. But I don't know a whole lot about Egyptian history or how these artifacts were shared, but I'm sure that Mr. Monkey Swag 96, who loves Egyptian history, can probably have some insight on some of this. But very interesting indeed. It says that stunning Levantine gold artifacts found in King Tutankhamen's tomb were revealed for the first time in almost a century. Almost 100 gold artifacts found in King Tut's tomb were made in the Middle East. The treasure includes decorative fittings for bow cases, quivers, and bridles. They were transported hundreds of miles to be placed in the tomb. Among the finds are images of fighting animals and goats at the Tree of Life. The motifs are foreign to Egyptian art and must have come from the Levant. And the Levant is the area that's essentially parts of Syria and down into Iraq. In fact, that's that whole area, and even into Israel, what is now Israel as well. And it kind of curves up and through that area. A number of gold pieces of artwork found in King Tut's tomb, made in Syria, have been revealed for the first time in almost a century. Almost 100 decorative fittings for bow cases, quivers, and bridles were transported hundreds of miles to be placed in the pharaoh's 3,340-year-old tomb. Their story can finally be told after they lay in a wooden box for more than 90 years after being discovered by British archaeologist Howard Carter in 1922. The box had laid undisturbed in the Cairo Museum for decades before researchers spent 4 years restoring its deteriorated contents. Among the finds are images of fighting animals and goats at the Tree of Life that are foreign to Egyptian art and must have come from the Levant or modern-day Syria. Now let's take a look at this. This is not a very clear image of this particular piece, but you can see the different pieces here. We'll see other images as we move down here. And some of these gold artifacts in King Tut's tomb were actually made in Syria rather than Egypt. Almost 100 decorative fittings for bow cases and bridles were transported hundreds of miles to be placed. But before we do that, let's look at read more about this discovery. Let's go back in time about the discovery of King Tut's tomb. In 1907, Lord Carnarvon George Herbert asked English archaeologist and Egyptologist Howard Carter to supervise excavation at the Valley of the Kings. On the 4th of November 1922, Carter's group found steps that led to King Tut's tomb. He spent several months cataloging the antechamber before opening the burial chamber, discovering the sarcophagus in February of 1923. Tut was an Egyptian pharaoh from the 18th dynasty and ruled between 1332 BC and 1323 BC. He was the son of Akhenaton and took to the throne at the tender age of 9 or 10. When he became king, he married his half-sister, Ankhesenpaten. He died around the age of 18, and his cause of death is unknown. So very interesting indeed. So that's kind of how it was discovered, and that's the background of King Tut. Land researcher Professor Peter Salzner of the University of Tübingen in Germany said, presumably these motifs, which were once developed in Mesopotamia, made their way to the Mediterranean region and Egypt via Syria. This again shows a great role that ancient Syria played in the dissemination of culture during the Bronze Age. The embossed gold relics were found by his team, and the very same crate in which they were placed in 1922 after the famed find by Carter. At the time, the relics were photographed and packed into the crate, where they were left to deteriorate for almost a century. During 4 years of detailed work, conservators at the Egyptian Museum in Cairo reassembled the fragments to produce the almost complete embossed gold decorations. They also made drawings of the items and carried out comprehensive research. Professor Falsner and colleagues examined and categorized the artwork on the artifacts. The team distinguished Egyptian motifs from those that could be ascribed to an international Middle Eastern canon from the Levant. Look at that, and this one shows some great detail in that piece. Beautiful. And now we know that that was done up in Syria. Very nice fighting animals pictured there. Very interesting indeed. The team distinguished Egyptian motifs from those that could be ascribed as international Middle Eastern canon from the Levant. They would have been shipped around 400 miles to modern-day Cairo across desert and water. The ancient Egyptians didn't build roads to travel through their empire as they didn't need them thanks to the Nile. Most major cities were located along the banks of the iconic river. As a result, they used it for transportation from very early on, becoming expert at boat building and navigation. Boats used to carry huge stones weighing as much as 500 tons from rock quarries to pyramid building sites. And that's how the imports came through Egypt. And so these would have been shipped around 400 miles to modern Cairo across desert and water. The ancient Egyptians didn't build roads, as we mentioned. Most major cities were along the river. As a result, they used for transportation very early on, becoming experts. The embossed gold relics were found by his team in the very same crate in which they were placed in 1922 after the famed find by British archaeologist Howard Carter. And here you can see the original box. Very nice. Let's read about the bizarre burial of King Tut. Researchers from the American University of Cairo believe that the king's appendage was embalmed at a 90-degree angle to make the young pharaoh appear as Osiris, the god of the underworld. That's interesting. The angling of the penis was a feature worn by corn mummies. There you go, corn stacker. Corn mummies created in the honor of Osiris. The mummy was also covered in black liquid to resemble Osiris's skin. Elsewhere, Tut's heart was missing when the tomb was discovered by Howard Carter in 1922. Religious texts claimed Osiris's heart was similarly removed by his brother Seth. On the outside of the tomb, decorations depicted Tut as Osiris. Interesting indeed. Eventually, bigger Cairo ships were made of wood. It talks about those ships, and the Egyptians sailed those ships up and down the Nile. And but let's see here. Here's more artifacts here. A pristine king's grave in 2002. They found another king. And here are the restored artifacts that are in a special exhibition at the Egyptian Museum, which opened on Wednesday. So these you can see if you want to travel to Cairo. Let's take a look at this. Again, not a totally clear image of the pieces, but here is a famous mask that we see here. Very nice, of King Tut. Beautifully done. And here is a map that shows the regions. And here's the Valley of the Kings in this area. How far away it was down the Nile. Very interesting. And the Valley of the Kings, which is in Upper Egypt, is one of the main tourist attractions of the country next to the Giza Pyramid Complex. The majority of the pharaohs of the 18th to 20th dynasties who ruled from 1550 to 1069 BC rested in the tombs, which were cut into local rock. The most famous pharaoh of the site is Tutankhamun, whose tomb was discovered in 1922. Preserved to this day, the tomb are original decorations of sacred imagery from, among others, the Book of Gates and the Book of Caverns. These are among the most important funeral texts found in the walls of the ancient Egyptian tomb. And here we see a map and aerial imagery showing all the different tombs that were found in the Valley of the Kings, from the son of Ramses III to all the different Ramses, Seti, and others. Interesting indeed. So there you have it. What a fascinating story indeed. And these artifacts are now available for public viewing, have been released. More gold And it just goes to show you how much gold was valued even way before the time of Christ. Over 1,000 years before the time of Christ, and how gold was used and adorned the funeral pyres of ancient rulers. So post your thoughts below on this discovery and these intriguing artifacts. I'd like to extend a multitude of gratitude y'all for watching, and encourage you to please rate, comment, and subscribe.